hail came down like buckshot the night they tried to take the diner from me, and I remember thinking the sky had picked a side. It was 5:40 in the morning when the banging started, not knocking. Banging, the kind that makes the front windows shiver in their frames. I'd been up since 4 anyway, mixing the first batch of biscuit dough, flour to my elbows, the griddle just starting to tick as it warmed. For half a second I thought a pipe had burst. Then I heard her, "Open this door, Margaret. This is family property, and we are done playing games." My aunt. 40 years of cigarette gravel in that voice, and she still managed to make it carry over the rain. Behind her, I could hear my cousin, sharper and younger, going, "She's in there. I can see the lights. She always lights the grill first." And behind both of them, lower, almost apologetic, my uncle. The three of them on my doorstep at 5:45, like a collection agency that worked the graveyard shift. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked to the front. Through the glass, I could see them under the awning, soaked, my aunt holding something in her right hand that took me a beat to register. A pry bar. The flat black kind you buy at the hardware store on Route 9 for $30. She had it raised toward the door seam like she'd already decided how this was going to go. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open myself. All three of them froze. My aunt's arm hung there in the air, the pry bar dripping. My cousin's mouth was open mid-sentence. My uncle had a travel mug of coffee in his hand and the dumbest look on his face, like a man who'd come to watch a fight and just realized he might be in it. "Morning," I said. I kept my voice even. I'd spent 12 years in restaurant kitchens, learning how to sound calm while everything around me was on fire. "You're early. We don't open till 6. Don't you get cute with me." My aunt lowered the bar, but only a little. "We know what you did. We know you went behind everybody's back." I didn't answer her. I reached over to the host stand, to the manila folder I'd started keeping there 3 weeks ago, after the first phone call, and I held it up so the streetlight caught it. The deed transfer. The SBA loan paperwork. The bill of sale with my name printed across the top in clean black type. Margaret Whitlow, sole owner, Sunrise Counter, 114 Delford Street. "This is mine," I said. "Bought it. Paid for it. You don't have to break anything. There's nothing in here for you." My cousin scoffed. "You used Grandma's name to get that place. Everybody knows it. That diner's been Whitlow family since before you were born." "It was Grandma's lease," I said. "Grandma's lease that lapsed in March when nobody but me showed up to pay it. The building went to auction. I bought the building. There's a difference, and you'd know it if any of you had read a single email I sent." I tapped the folder. "It's all in here. Every cent came out of my account. You want to use that bar on my filing cabinet too?" That landed. My aunt's jaw worked, but nothing came out. My uncle finally spoke, soft, the way he always talked when he wanted to be on the winning side without having to pick it. "Maggie, come on now. Nobody's breaking anything. We just came to talk." "With a crowbar," I said. "It was raining." She grabbed the first thing. It was the first thing in the truck bed at 5 in the morning. "You don't grab a pry bar by accident, Uncle Ray. You bring it." I looked at all of them, and I felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, exactly. Just the end of something. People who want to talk, bring coffee. You brought a tool to open a door that isn't yours. The rain kept coming down behind them. Somewhere up the street a garbage truck was doing its rounds, hydraulics whining like the whole town had decided to keep moving while my family stood frozen on my step. "You always thought you were better than us," my cousin said. It was the thing they always reached for, the oldest card in the deck. "Off in the city with your fancy jobs, your fancy chef friends, and now you come back and steal the one thing that was supposed to be all of ours." "I didn't steal anything," I said. "I just stopped letting you take it." I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. The click of it sounded enormous in the quiet, and on the other side of the glass I watched my aunt stand there for a long moment, the pry bar at her side, staring at me the way you stare at a stranger who turns out to know your name. Then my uncle put a hand on her shoulder, and the three of them turned and went back out into the rain. and I leaned my forehead against the cold door and breathed. The biscuits were burning. I could smell them. I went back to the kitchen and pulled the tray and scraped the black ones into the bin and started over, because that's the thing nobody tells you about war coming to your door at dawn. The biscuits still have to get made. The door's still open at 6. Life doesn't pause for the people who try to break it. I want to back up, because if I just tell you about the morning with the crowbar, you'll think my family woke up one day and went feral. They didn't. It was slower than that. It was years of small things stacked one on top of the other until the stack was the size of a building. 3 months before that morning, I drove a U-Haul into Delford with everything I owned in the back of it. I'd spent 11 years cooking in Chicago, the last 4 as a sous chef at a place downtown that had its name in a magazine once, which is the kind of thing that sounds impressive until you realize it means working 90-hour weeks for a man who threw sauté pans. I was 31 and tired in a way. Sleep didn't fix. My grandmother had just gone into assisted living after a fall, and somebody in the family needed to be close, and I was the only one without a mortgage or a marriage to use as a reason not to. So, I came home. Delford, Ohio, population not enough. The kind of place where the same 4 last names show up on the war memorial and the church directory and the booking log at the county jail. Whitlow's one of those names. We'd been there 4 generations. My great-grandfather worked the rail yard. My grandfather opened a lunch counter on Delford Street in 1961 and ran it until his hands gave out. And my grandmother kept it limping along for years after, more out of stubbornness than profit. By the time I came home, the Sunrise counter was a sad place. Cracked vinyl booths, a coffee maker held together with a hose clamp, a menu that hadn't changed since the Clinton administration. But it was the one thing my whole family agreed they loved, in the way families love a thing they all want credit for, and none of them want to clean. I moved in with my aunt at first. Aunt Verna, my mother's older sister, who raised me for a stretch after my mum passed when I was 19, and who never once let me forget it. Her house smelled like pottery and resentment. From day one, it was the same routine. I cooked dinner, she called it earning your keep. I fixed her gutters, she called it the least you could do. Every favor went into a ledger she kept somewhere behind her eyes, and I learned fast that nothing in Verna's house was free, least of all the roof. My cousin Renata was there a lot too. Verna's daughter, 2 years younger than me, with a string of businesses that all started bright and ended in collections. A boutique that folded. A wellness brand that was mostly her selling vitamins to her old high school friends until they stopped answering. By the time I came home, she was onto a vintage resale thing run out of Verna's garage, which meant a lot of other people's junk and a lot of money that never quite materialized. And then there was Uncle Ray, Verna's husband, who'd spent 30 years agreeing with whoever was in the room. The plan, my plan, was simple, and I told it to everybody openly, because I'm an idiot who still believed in family back then. The building the diner was in had gone into pre-foreclosure. The old lease my grandmother held had lapsed because, it turned out, nobody had been paying it for almost a year. The whole family thought the diner was some asset that just sat there belonging to all of us. None of them had bothered to check that the asset was 3 months from being auctioned to a developer who wanted to put up a vape shop. I had savings, 11 years of double shifts, no kids, no vacations, a 401k. I was willing to gut. I had a good credit score because I'm a person who pays things. I qualified for an SBA loan, the kind the government backs for small businesses, and I told the bank I wanted to buy the building outright and reopen the counter as something worth eating at. Real food. Local eggs. A reason for people to drive in from the next county. I told all of this to Verna over her kitchen table. I remember she went very still, the way she did when she was recalculating something. "Well now," she said, "that's a family building." "It's a building the family let go to auction," I said. "I'm trying to save it. And whose name does it go under? Mine. I'm the one taking the loan. I'm the one on the hook if it fails." She smiled at me then, and I should have read that smile better than I did. "Honey," she said, "in this family, nobody does anything just for themselves." I let it go. God help me, I let it go, because I was tired and grateful for a bed, and I told myself she just talked like that it didn't mean anything. I closed on the building in April. I have a photo on my phone from that day, me standing in front of the boarded-up storefront holding the keys, grinning like a fool. I sent it to the family group chat. 3 people liked it. None of them said congratulations. 2 weeks later, Verna threw a welcome home dinner. It was at the Knights of Columbus Hall, which should have been my first clue, because you don't rent a hall for a dinner. You rent a hall for an announcement. There were 40 people there. Relatives I hadn't seen since my mother's funeral. Verna's church friends. A neighbour who once told me, to my face, that culinary school was a waste for a girl who could have gotten a real degree. I walked in expecting a casserole and a card, and instead there was a banner. Verna stood up before I'd even found my seat, tapped a fork on a glass, got that wet shine in her eyes she could summon on command. I just want to say, she said, how proud this family is. Maggie's come home and she's reopening our sunrise counter, the heart of this town. And the best part, she paused, the showman's pause, is that it's going to be a fresh start for Renata too. She's going to run the front of house. Finally, a place for the whole family to build together. The room applauded. People turned to smile at me. Renata, 3 seats down, did a little wave like a beauty queen, like it was already settled, like she hadn't told me a single word about any of this. I sat there with my hands flat on the tablecloth, and I felt my whole face go cold. I'm sorry, I said, and the room sort of rippled because I'd said it too loud. What do you mean she's going to run the front of house? Verna's smile didn't move. Well, dear, it's a family business. It's my business. It's in my name. I took the loan. You bought it with the family's blessing, she said smoothly. For the family. Renata needs the work. You've got the kitchen. It just makes sense. We're not going to air this here, are we? In front of everyone. And there it was. The trap she'd built the whole dinner to spring. 40 witnesses she'd primed to see me as the ungrateful one. If I said yes, I'd handed half my livelihood to a woman who'd never finished a thing in her life. If I said no, I was the cold city girl breaking her family's heart at her own welcome party. I stood up. My chair scraped loud against the floor. Enjoy the dinner, I said. It looks lovely. Thank you for putting it together. Margaret. Verna's voice had gone flat. Sit down. I've spent 11 years, I said. Quiet now, just for her, though the whole room had gone silent enough to hear it. Letting this family put my name on the bill for everything and the credit on nobody. I'm not doing it with the diner. It's mine. I'll cook for this town every day of my life. But I won't be cooked, Verna. Not by you. Not anymore. I got my coat. Renata hissed something about me embarrassing her. My uncle stared at the floor, and I walked out into the parking lot, and the night's air was sharp and clean, and it felt like the first full breath I'd taken in months. I didn't drive back to Verna's. I drove to the diner, and I sat in the empty dining room in the dark. And the next morning I called a locksmith and changed every lock in the place. Not because I thought they'd come, because for the first time I knew they would. The phone calls started the next day. Verna, 6 times before noon, leaving voicemails that swung from honey to venom inside a single sentence. Renata texting paragraphs about loyalty and blood. I didn't answer. I went to the hardware store on Route 9, yeah, the same one, and I bought a second deadbolt and a video doorbell, and I installed them both myself. And I want you to know that mounting a deadbolt when your hands are shaking with adrenaline at 9 in the morning is its own kind of education. Then I found out Verna had given Renata a key. She told me herself, on the phone, in the voice of a woman explaining something obvious to a slow child. I had a copy made from the old set, she said. Just in case. Family shares things, Margaret. The locks are changed, I said. Your copy opens nothing. You changed the locks on your own family. She made it sound like I'd burned the flag. Then don't try the door, I said, and I hung up, and that was the last conversation we had that didn't end up in a folder. For a few weeks it was just noise. Then it got quiet, and quiet from Verna was worse, because quiet meant she was working. The first sign was the mail, a letter from a credit union 2 towns over, addressed to me referencing an application in progress for a line of credit I had never applied for. Then a second one. Both of them listed a business name underneath mine, Whitlow Family Holdings, which did not exist, which I had never heard of, which somebody had apparently invented to make my building sound like a shared asset. My stomach dropped through the floor. I called the credit union. It took 3 transfers and 40 minutes on hold to get a manager who could actually see the file, and when she did, she got very careful with her words. There was an application initiated under your name and EIN, she said, listing a co-applicant. It was flagged before approval. A signature inconsistency. Who was the co-applicant? A pause. The sound of someone deciding how much to tell me. Renata Whitlow. I sat down on the floor of my own kitchen. Just sat down right there on the rubber mat with the walk-in humming behind me and tried to do the math on what I was hearing. Somebody had tried to use my building, my loan, my name, as collateral for a credit line, and the only way they could have gotten far enough to get flagged was if they had paperwork. My paperwork. That night I went through my files, the real ones, the ones I'd brought from the bank, and that's when I found it. A form I'd signed back in February, before the auction, when I was still living at Verna's and still trusting her. A limited power of attorney. I'd signed it so she could deal with my grandmother's facility paperwork while I was tied up closing on the building. Verna had insurance documents and Medicaid forms coming out of her ears, and she'd asked me, sweet as pie, to sign so she wouldn't have to bother me with every little thing. I'd signed the top sheet. I'd trusted her to handle the rest. It wasn't forged. That was the part that made me sick, sitting there at my own counter at midnight. My aunt didn't fake my signature. She didn't have to. I gave it to her. She just used it for things I never imagined. The way you hand someone a key for the front door and come home to find they've been living in your bedroom for months. I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, I did the only thing I knew how to do when everything's chaos, which is make a list. I labeled a folder. I started scanning. Bank letters, the POA, screenshots of every text, the voicemails I'd been too proud to listen to. I listened to all of them now, with a notepad, writing down the date and the worst line from each. By dawn, I had a stack of paper an inch thick, and I had stopped shaking, and I felt, for the first time since the welcome dinner, like I had ground under my feet. That was a Tuesday. On Thursday, the phone rang with a number I didn't know and a voice I hadn't heard in 8 years. Maggie Whitlow. As I live and breathe. It was Dolores Kaminsky. Dolores had run the front office at the culinary program I'd scraped through at 22. A square-shouldered woman who'd worked 30 years in restaurant accounting before she taught it, and who'd once chased a vendor across a parking lot over an invoice. We'd kept in touch the way you keep in touch with people you respect. Barely, but warmly. She'd seen something. A mutual friend had posted about the diner reopening, and my cousin, in the comments, had been running her mouth about family stakeholders and shared ownership. I don't know what's going on with you, Dolores said, but I've done this long enough to smell it. Somebody's setting up to claim a piece of your business, and they're doing it in public so the paper trail looks friendly. Maggie, you need to lock down your EIN and freeze your business credit yesterday. And if anybody's been operating under your name, you need a lawyer who handles fraud, not your cousin's guy who does wills. I told her everything. The POA, the credit union, the application. She went quiet, and then she said the thing that changed how I saw all of it. Honey, this isn't a family argument. This is financial fraud. The fact that you're related to the people doing it doesn't make it a smaller crime. It makes it a more common one. She paused. There's a legal aid clinic for small business owners over in the county seat. Pro bono and sliding scale. I'm going to text you the name. You call them in the morning. And Maggie, document everything. You don't fight people like this with feelings. You fight them with a binder. A binder. I almost laughed. I already had the folder. I'd build the binder by Sunday. The legal aid clinic put me with a lawyer named Hollis Tran, a small woman with reading glasses on a chain, and the patience of someone who'd seen every flavor of family go rotten. She read my binder front to back without saying a word, which took 20 minutes, and when she finished, she took off the glasses and looked at me. "Okay," she said. "First, the good news. The power of attorney was limited and time-bound, and it doesn't grant authority to encumber your real property or open credit in your name. So anything they did with it past the scope is unauthorized. The credit application getting flagged actually helps you. There's a record of the attempt and the inconsistency. Second," she tapped the POA, "I'm going to send a revocation today, certified, and file a copy with the county recorder so it's on public record that this is dead. Then we freeze your business credit, put a fraud alert on your personal credit, and I send a letter to that credit union demanding the full application file. Once we have it, if it shows what I think it shows, we report it." "Report it to who?" I said. She looked at me steady. "To the people whose job it is to handle fraud. I know they're your family. I'll ask you once, do you want this to stop, or do you want them to like you? Because in my experience, you usually can't have both." I thought about the welcome dinner, the 40 faces turning to me, primed to think I was the villain. I thought about the pry bar. "Make it stop," I said. "Here's what I've learned about people who take and take. They don't get loud when you push back. They get strategic." While Hollis was filing revocations and freezing my credit, Verna was rebuilding the story in public. Renata posted a photo of herself standing in front of my diner, with my new sign half installed behind her, captioned about coming home to run the family business and grateful for fresh starts. The comments filled up with people who hadn't set foot in Delford in years, congratulating her. Then a longer post from Verna herself about how some people forget where they came from, how success changes a person, how a mother just wants her family whole. She never used my name. She didn't have to. Everybody knew. The messages started coming in from people on the edges. A second cousin. A woman from the church. "Is it true you cut your aunt out? Verna says you won't even let your own cousin work, after everything she did raising you." Each one, polite as a knife. I didn't answer any of them. Dolores had told me silence was the strongest thing I had, that the second I started defending myself online, I'd be feeding a fight Verna could win, because she'd been fighting that kind of fight her whole life and I'd been busy actually working. So I said nothing. I screenshotted everything and put it in the binder, and I opened the diner every single morning at 6. And here's the thing nobody in my family counted on. The town showed up. Not for the drama, for the food. I'd put real eggs on that menu. Biscuits I'd developed over 100 bad batches in Chicago. Coffee that didn't taste like a hose clamp. The line started going out the door by week 3. The high school kids came after practice. The retired guys from the rail yard claimed the corner booth every morning at 7. A food writer from the Columbus paper drove out on a tip and ran 400 words about the best breakfast in 3 counties. And after that, I had to start a wait list on Saturdays. You want to know what beats a smear campaign? Being good at your job, out loud, in public, every day, while the people smearing you have nothing to show but a Facebook post. Verna could tell people I'd changed. The town could taste that I'd come home. The credit union file came back 6 weeks later. It was worse than I'd feared and better for my case than I'd hoped. The application listed my building as collateral. It used the lapsed POA as the authorization. And the signature inconsistency the bank had flagged was Renata signing my name on a consent line. Not forging it well, just badly. A sloppy version of my own handwriting she must have practiced off a check. That one wasn't an authorized signature used wrong. That one was forgery. Hollis laid it all out for me at her office, the pages fanned across her desk. "This is no longer ambiguous," she said. "Unauthorized use of a power of attorney is one thing. A forged signature on a financial application is a felony in this state. So is attempting to obtain a loan under false pretenses." She folded her hands. "We have 2 roads. One, we make it go away. Full revocation, a cease and desist, restitution, and they sign something promising to never come near your business again. Quiet. Done. They keep their freedom and you keep your peace, but you have to trust paper to hold people who've never honored anything in their lives. 2. We hand the file to the county prosecutor and let the state decide. I sat with it. I genuinely sat with it for a long time. Because there was a girl in me, 19 years old, who just lost her mother, who Werner had taken in, and that girl wanted to find a version of this where everyone got to be okay. But I wasn't 19 anymore, and I'd read the comments. I'd seen the pry bar. Both, I said. Hollis raised an eyebrow. Send the cease and desist. File the revocation. Lock the building down so they can never touch it again. I took a breath. And give the file to the prosecutor. They forged my name to take a thing I built. The town deserves to know what that family does behind the church potlucks. I'm done protecting people who came to my door with a crowbar. She nodded slowly, like I'd passed a test she hadn't told me I was taking. All right, she said. Then let's do it right. It moved faster than I thought it would. The prosecutor's office was hungry for a clean elder and family financial case, the kind that usually never gets reported because the victim is too ashamed or too loyal. My binder did most of the work. Renata was charged with forgery and attempted fraud. Werner for the unauthorized use of the power of attorney and her name all over the application, got pulled into it too. Hollis told me later the prosecutor went easier on her than he could have. A plea, probation, restitution, a felony on her record that meant she'd never hold a notary license or a fiduciary role again in her life. Uncle Ray didn't get charged with anything. He just stood there, the way he always did. I think in some ways that's its own sentence. The town found out. Of course it did. It's Delford. And the Facebook story flipped overnight, because it turns out a forged signature charge in the county docket is harder to spin than a sad post about an ungrateful niece. The same people who'd messaged me with their polite knives went very quiet. A few of them showed up at the diner like nothing had happened, ordered the biscuits, left big tips out of guilt. I took the tips. I'm not a saint. Werner and Renata stopped reaching out, and I changed my number anyway. Not out of fear, but out of housekeeping, the way you finally throw out a chair that's been broken for years. No forwarding. No last chance voicemail. Just clean. The morning the case closed, Hollis called me with the news and I was elbow deep in the Saturday rush, and I had to set the phone on the counter and keep plating while she talked. The building was mine, free and clear, with a fraud alert and a credit freeze and a public record of revocation so airtight that nobody named Whitlow could so much as breathe near it without a judge knowing. Permanent, she said. As in forever. You did good, she said. Most people in your spot fold. They'd rather lose the money than lose the family. You didn't fold. They brought a crowbar, I said. She laughed. Yeah. They always tip their hand eventually. I want to tell you it felt like victory, but it didn't. Not the way you'd think. It felt like the moment after you stop pressing on a wound and realize the bleeding's already stopped. Just quiet, just the griddle ticking and the rush dying down and the smell of coffee and bacon and the rain finally clearing off outside the front windows. About a year later, on a slow Sunday, the bell over the door rang and it was Uncle Ray. Older, smaller. He stood in the doorway in his church clothes, holding his hat in both hands like a man at a funeral. They closed the garage business, he said, by way of hello. Renata moved to Toledo. Werner's not doing too good. He looked around at the full booths, the new sign, the photo on the wall from the Columbus paper. Place looks real nice, Maggie. Real nice. I came around the counter and I poured him a coffee, because I'm not made of stone and because it was my counter and my coffee, and I could pour it for whoever I wanted. You want anything to eat, Uncle Ray? He looked at the coffee. He looked at me. Your aunt asks about you. She'd want me to say she's sorry. Would she? I said. Not cruel, just true. He didn't answer that. He drank his coffee and he left a 5 on the counter and he stood up to go. And at the door he stopped. I should have said something, he said, not turning around. That morning, I should have taken the bar out of her hand. Yeah, I said. You should have. He nodded at the door and then he opened it himself, gently, the way you open a door that belongs to somebody else. And the bell rang and he was gone. I cleared his cup. I wiped the counter. The 7 o'clock regulars from the rail yard were arguing about the weather in the corner booth, and a couple I didn't recognize was studying the menu like it was a map to somewhere good. And the griddle was hot, and the door was open, and every single thing in that room belonged to me. Not because I took it from anybody, but because I was the only one who ever showed up to build it. The rain had stopped. The sign out front caught the morning light. My grandfather's name retired and mine up there now in clean black letters. And I thought about how the worst part was never that they tried to break the door. The worst part was knowing, deep down for years, that they would, and opening it anyway one last time, just to let them see exactly what I'd been holding the whole time. I flipped the next batch of biscuits. The bell over the door rang. "Morning," I called out, and I meant it, and I got back to work.